So, good morning to all of you from North Carolina. And we are continuing today with our series of lectures connected to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's Sri Raga-vartma-candrika, the moon ray which sheds light on the path of Rag. So today we have meeting number 17. We are, if everything goes well, we are finishing today the first part of Raga-vartma-candrika, the first illumination, sometimes also called the first prakash. Pratama prakash will be the first illumination of this moon ray. So we are still studying the 14th part of this first illumination, 14th verse or prose. So we are in our fourth class connected to this 14th section of the first part. So let's first of all, as usual, let's make some brief recap of what we saw last class in our third section of studying this 14th prose. So there, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, we are speaking, as you may recall, about this fivefold division of raga bhakti engagement, as Vishwanath has put, bhava sambandhi, bhavamai, bhava sambandhi, bhava nukul, bhava abhirudh, bhava virudh. So still in this two last discussions, we have been speaking about bhava sambandhi, two things that are related to one's cherished mood. So as part of that, in our previous discussion, Vishwanath was speaking about Kartik Brat. After he spoke about Ekadasi, Janmastami, and other festivities in the other class, the previous one to this. In the last one, he spoke about the holy month of Kartik, and he said it's twofold. The performance of the observance of Kartik may fall in the category of the two phases of bhava sambandhi. As you may recall, we spoke about upadana karana and nimitta karana, direct cause or indirect cause, ingredient cause or instrumental cause, different ways of speaking about this bhava sambandhi. So he mentioned Kartik may be falling in each of these two categories, depending on how we approach it, if you will. Hearing and chanting, Shravan and Kirtan, and all this will have to do with Upadana Karana, the main aspect of embracing Kartik, going deep into those practices, and avoiding certain foods and having certain tapasya, if you will, in the context of bhakti, will be considered as Nimitta Karana of Bhava Sambandhi. Also, at the end, he mentioned how, regarding Kartik, how Rupa Goswami has named Sri Radha with different names connected to Kartik, like Kartik Devi, Urja Devi, Urjeswari, like the goddess of resources, devotional resources, and so on. And it is thus clear, he mentioned, that by following Kartik in the most substantial way, one will have a special opportunity to attain her favor. And thus, this Kartik Brat is compulsory. So in that context, we also mentioned how Kartik Brat is connected to the Damodar month and the special feature of the worship of Sri Radha Damodar in this particular month, especially with the idea of attaining these blessings of Urjeshwari, Sri Radha. For continuing to his point, Vishwanath after that starts to glorify Srimad Bhagavatam. He shares two quotes from the Bhagavat, one of them which speaks to Ambarish, not all of them from the Bhagavat, but related to the Bhagavat. In one of them, Ambarish receives the idea of hearing Bhagavat by Sukadev, coming from another Purana, I think it was Padma Purana. So Vishwanath mentions here in the Bhagavad is a perpetual duty, nitya kritya. And he shares another two quotes. That was the two quotes from the Bhagavad from the 12th canto, which speaks about the constant hearing, how one should constantly hear about, if you wish pure devotion, you should constantly hear the glorification, the kirtan of Nam, Guna, Rupa, Lila, Bhagavan. This is coming from the 12th canto of the Bhagavad. And thus Vishwanath concludes, we should understand that hearing about the character of one's dear most, especially as related in the 10th canto of the Bhagavad, Braja Lila section more especially, is a perpetual duty as well in the context of Bhava Sambandhi, activity related to one's cherished mood. So in that connection, these Bhagavad practices are also mentioned, as you know, by Rupa Goswami in his list of Bhakti Angas, different items, 43, 54, 61, all of these connected somehow or other with the Bhagavatam, directly or indirectly, hearing about the Lord and his qualities, render service to the scriptures that present bhakti. Maybe they are not mentioning Bhagavat directly, but Bhagavat is the topmost Shastric emperor in this connection. And finally, Bhagavat Shravan, hearing, relishing Bhagavat in Sadhu Sangha. So we share many other quotes and evidence from the Bhagavat itself about its own supremacy. And finally, before continuing with the next section, which today we'll start, Bhava Anukul, also Vishwanath mentioning some other items that may fall in the category of Bhava Sambandhi, such as wearing tulasi in the form of garland, nirmalya, perfumes, sandalwood paste, garlands, and other ornaments that have been offered to the Lord, of course, not any garland, any perfume, and so on. And that's also considered as Bhava Sambandhi. So Vishwanath mentions these items mainly. We quoted this famous verse of Uddhav that he mentioned that by only dressing and surrounding himself by whatever has been used by Krishna in Dwarka, he will conquer Maya. Whatever prasadi, clothes, garlands come from the Lord, he will transcend the extrinsic potency of Bhagavan by that type of Bhava Sambandhi. So today, last class we have finished in this way with what's Bhava Sambandhi. And today we will continue with the three remaining categories that Vishwanath presented here. Svabhishta Bhava Anukul, Svabhishta Bhava Avirud, and Svabhishta Bhava Virud. Those elements that are favorable, neutral, and detrimental, respectively, to one's cherished mood. So I think we will be able to finish all of that today because Vishwanath will present them in a more brief way here, more abridged. And this way we'll be able to finish the first illumination, the first section of this Raga-vartma-candrika. So that's a brief summary. Let's start with the first section of today's class, where we will be starting with Bhava Anukul. So I will share with you in the chat this brief section. We will share many brief sections today, all of them relatively connected to this topic. So that's the first one. So I will read it. It says like this. Wearing neck beads of tulasi wood, wearing tilak made of gopi chandan, and so forth, and wearing the names of footprints of Krishna are known as the signs of a Vaishnava and are considered as Bhava Anukul, favorable to the development of one's cherished mood. Serving tulasi, doing parikram, offering obeisances, and so forth are also Bhava Anukul. So let's try to unfold a little bit the implications of this first section. So remember, all this we should bear in mind, have in context that all the things Vishwanath is mentioning in the context of what Rupa Goswami mentioned in his list of 64 angas of bhakti. He's kind of trying to elaborate on them, maybe not going through each of the 64 of them, but touching on the main points and kind of dividing such a big list in these 5 categories he's mentioning here. So here, in connection to Rupa Goswami's list, we have the 21st anga of his list, anga of bhakti, which is wearing the marks of a Vaishnava. So that's connected to this particular section, the first part of what we read here. At the end, we have some other section more connected to Tulasi. We will speak about that as well. But all these aspects are connected here. Anga 21 mentions wearing the marks of the Vaishnava. The next anga, 22, in Rupa Goswami's list, speaks about wearing the syllables of the name. Of course, how you wear the syllable by putting them with chandan in your body. And anga 53 of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu speaks about service to things related to the Lord and service to Tulasi. So now that will be also connected to what we have here. So mainly this section, or the first part of the section we shared, has to do, let's say, with the ornamentation of our sadhaka deha. That's an important point. We already spoke about siddha deha, sadhaka deha, the importance of using our sadhaka deha properly, of embracing properly that opportunity, and that how that will result in the appearance eventually of the Siddha Deha as a result of that. So here there is some further elaboration of how to beautify Sadhaka Deha, how to properly decorate such a temple, if you will, such a gift given by Sri Guru. So we will try to speak about that. First of all, the mentioning of Tulsi neck beads is mentioned here. In the previous section, we spoke about garlands that may include Tulsi, but now we are going to another category, which is not a direct remnant from Bhagavan, and thus is not falling into the category of Bhava Sambandhi, but Bhava Anukul. Favorable items. There is some slight difference between Bhava Sambandhi and Bhava Anukul, as we will be seeing. So Tulsi, of course, we can say so many things about Tulsi. I don't want to over expand in that direction because today we don't have a Tulsi seminar, but she's mentioned here, so some words we should do in her honor. Srimati Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. So she's, as you know, considered an expression of Vrinda Devi, who is herself considered the Lila Shakti in Braj, in Vrindavan. She's generally also Vrinda Devi in Braj. She's associated, as you may know, with Jogamaya, Purnamasi, in connection to arranging all the affairs of the Lila, invoking all the proper arrangements and environments and items that are necessary for the proper arousal of a specific overflowing of rasa there. So in other words, she's considered as an aspect of Jogamaya or the Swarup Shakti. And that's in that connection, the name of since she's so much in charge of orchestrating the dynamics in Braj, the name of the forest has been named after her, Vrindavan. Vrindavan means the forest of Vrinda Devi. So all of Vrindavan was her property basically. And it is said that she offered such a forest to the lotus feet of Sri Radha. There are many pastimes in the scriptures describing this, how Sri Radha becomes the empress, you say in Spanish, in English, the female form of emperor. And she became the owner, if you will, the mistress of Sri Braj. And so many nice pastimes where Krishna wants to argue that he's the owner of Braj and so on, but Sri Radha is always the one who defeats him, Jayasri, the all-victorious Sri Radha. So the point is that each plant, going from Vrinda Devi to Tulsi Maharani is an expression of Vrinda Devi in the form of a plant. So each plant is an expression of this Shakti, which is not Jiva Shakti. Tulsi Maharani, Tulsi plant is not considered Jiva Shakti, but Bhakti Shakti Tattva. So it's approached from that particular sense. So Tulsi is the very same Vrinda Devi, but in the form of a plant. We see her in the form of a plant, but that's the point. But we should understand she's not a plant actually. She represents, sometimes she's called Vaishnavi Shakti, the female representation of this Shakti of servanthood, of the Shakti that of Vaishnavahood, if you will, that allows us to eventually become Vaishnavas. So she appears in the world in the form of the tree, which is its abode. Tulasi tree is the abode of this Vaishnavi Shakti, of what Vrinda Devi represents. And that's why the point is all the Vaishnavas are worshipping Tulasi in different ways, as we will see. But one of them, a very immediate way, is by wearing her around their necks, basically, as Tulasi Mala, another form of Mala, neck of the wooden beads of Tulasi. This is a very important thing. You see that Vaishnavas may use or may not use certain items, but Tulasi, basically it's mandatory, it's always there. And of course, something that has to be mentioned here is that the wearing of Tulasi neck beads is not just like an ordinary affair. Like, okay, I go and I get, because sometimes we may get accustomed, as Guru Maharaj sometimes says, in a time of Prabhupada, devotees didn't have deities. The deities were in the temple, and some very few exceptional cases with the blessings of Prabhupada, they were worshipping some deities with the blessings of the pure devotee. But he was saying, but nowadays, sometimes devotees go to the Loi Bazaar, to the market, and buy deities and start to worship them, like in a more cheap way, if you will. That can happen. That's not the idea. In a less blessed way. So this can happen also with the neck bead, the Tulasi Mala. You can go to the market, you buy a mala, Tulasi Mala. If you are especially in Indian Vrindavan, you find so many street shops at every step there about that. And you can just put it, and that's all. But the idea is we should receive that from the Vaishnava. Tulasi represents herself, this Vaishnavi Shakti, but that's not an excuse to transgress the department, if you will, of the Vaishnava. So ideally, of course, more officially in the moment of initiation, as you know, Sri Guru bestows his mercy in so many ways, and one way that she will put Tulasi neckbit around the student. And of course, before doing that, the Guru herself will bless the mala, will sanctify the mala, will meditate, trying to invoke the descent of Bhagavan into that particular neckbit, and offering that to Sri Krishna and praying, may my disciple, may my student attain pure love for Krishna, attain bhakti, and wear this mala, of course. That's the whole idea. That speaks about the commitment. Somehow we are. That's like a type of rope that Guru puts around our neck, sometimes in a more literal way, not symbolic way. You say, okay, well, I have been tied around the neck. So that speaks in a loving way, of course, about the commitment established with Sri Guru in the context of bhakti, because the rope is made of tulasi, if you will. The rope is made of bhakti shakti. So that's what the commitment is about. That's a serious thing. It's a journey of no return, if you will. So the Guru himself will tie his disciple, will put the neck bit. Generally, he won't give the neck bits. You put the neck bit yourself. He will ask some devotee, senior Vaishnava, sometime to represent in this important moment of initiation. And so someone who uses that on the neck, that also imbibes the satisfaction of Krishna. Vaishnava Toshani, Krishna Toshani, giving pleasure to the Lord, to the Vaishnavas. So mala, the meaning mala, interestingly, Anantadas Pandit shares a very nice verse about that. Only then the proper meaning of the word mala will be actually manifest. And there's one quote, the source is not there, but says that these two words, mala, these two syllables, the syllable la stands for gift, and the syllable ma stands for wealth. So mala speaks of wealth and gift. And of course, bhakti is a gift, bhakti is non-inherent, and bhakti represents whole wealth. Golokya prema dan harinam sankirtan, the wealth of bhakti, the wealth of love. And so it's both a gift and it's both wealth. And so this verse says, oh Hari, oh Tulsi, you are Hari's, Hari Priya, beloved of Hari. And so you give to all devotees the treasure of Prem, and therefore your name is Mala. Mala. You are giving such a gift and such a treasure. So again, all this carries lots of implications. It's not just some aesthetic consideration and I will choose a certain mala and I will beautify myself in front of the mirror and so on. The real beautifying has to do with increasing our commitment with Sri Guru and the Vaishnava. So that's what these tulasi neckbits are about. So if we embrace that from this proper conception, that will be bhava nikul. That will represent a favorable impetus to our desired mode. Sometimes, and so it's important to understand this, to understand the standing of Tulasi herself and how she's been accessing to accompany us in our necks continuously. And sometimes the devotees may take the Tulasi bits. I have seen them visiting different places, like in Vrindavan, for example, sacred rivers, Jamuna, Ganga, Radhakund, and so on, and they put their beads, the Tulasi beads on the water, like purifying, no? But the point is that Tulasi is as sacred as Jamuna, as Ganga, and so on. So the point is no need for further purify the beads. They are already totally pure, and we need to purify ourselves by increasing such awareness. Padma Purana, for example, there's a verse that says that all the places of pilgrimage in the whole planet and in millions of universes take shelter in one leaf of Tulasi. So of course we are not wearing the leaf, we are wearing the wood, but in this case there is no difference. So all the sacred tirthas around the whole multiverse are taking shelter in Tulasi. So that's the point, that we want to remain blessed. We want to remain Daivim Prakriti Masrita, sheltered under the divine energy, under the Swarup Shakti. That's the whole statement by wearing this Tulasi Mala. We want to be, but we should be aware, no? I want to remain tied by the neck with the rope of devotional commitment, and thus protected and blessed by Srimati Tulasi and her representatives. Sometimes also it is said in connection of the three rounds of three strands, you say, of the necklace. Generally it's used three. Sometimes Vishwanath Krishnadas Kaviraj mentions in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, when he quotes the third verse of Sikshastakam, he speaks about the Vaishnavas and how the Vaishnavas should wear the Trinada Pisunichayana verse on their necks. So I always like to think that, okay, this neck bead of Tulasi represents this, and the three strands have Trinada Pisunichayana, Toroda Pisagishnuna, Amani Namanadena. No? Those three will allow Kirtaniya Sadhari, of course. So it's an important reminder, and Tulasi herself is personification of the proper attitude to engage in bhakti. So also this neck bead could be connected easily to the third verse of Sikshastakam by constantly having the proper attitude to always glorify Hari. Sometimes the scripture Shastra describes the Vaishnavas are ornamenting their throats by continuously keeping in their throats the glories of their Istadev. This implied by singing the glories of their Istadev, their beloved deity, so their throats remain always beautified, ornamented. So that has to do with Kirtaniya Sadahari, continuously engaging in glorification in Kirtan. And that has to do for sure with Sunichana, Saishuna Manina Manadina. So many implications we can take from this Kanti Mala, Tulasi neck bead. So Krishna in this way, Tulasi is very powerful, Vrinda Devi. Krishna himself is very indebted to Vrinda Devi to say that the Vrinda Devi is serving in such a way that Krishna himself, with so much paraphernalia, with everything she has, Krishna himself cannot repay to her. And so the point is, if anyone is given Tulasi to Krishna in the form of leaves sometimes, for example, he becomes shy and he will think, oh, this devotee has totally purchased me. We have the famous instance of Advaitacharya by invoking the descent of the Yuga Avatar, calling Mahaprabhu, and calling him where? With Ganga water and Tulsi leaves. Remember in one verse, I think from Padma Purana, which says, if someone offers some Tulsi leaves and Ganga water or Ganga Jal to the Lord, he immediately will be purchased. He's totally indebted to that person. So in this way, we try to be accompanied with Tulasi and pray for her blessings to obtain bhakti, as the Tulasi Arti, Tulasi Kirtan song always say. We are praying for bhakti adhikar, for attaining eligibility in the realm of devotion. So that's an important and favorable item that should be there, again, ornamenting our sadhaka deha. And we could say the same after that. Vishwanath mentions the wearing of tilak, tilak made of gopi chandan and so forth. So it's not only gopi chandan, as we will see, but that's one of the options. So gopi chandan or tilak is a very important point as well. Of course, I understand that for practical reasons, sometimes a Vaishnava may not be able to go to her job wearing tilak, but one can wear tilak at home during Katha, Kirtan, different japa and so on, starting the day with tilak, or even we can wear tilak if we cannot show the marks overtly in certain circumstances. We can put Ganga water, make the mark in tilak. So it's important. The point again is, as a transition, is like entering. It's a portal that allows us to realize, oh, this body is not my body. It does not belong to me. It's a sadhaka deha, belongs to Sri Guru. It's a gift given to me. I should ornament that, embellish that, and so on. So when we are putting the 12 marks of tilak, they constitute different main names and forms of Bhagavan. Narayan, Keshava, Madhusudan, Madhava, Govinda, Trivikram, and so on. So the Vaishnavas, we will be invoking their different names and placing, let's say, this 12-fold energy of Bhagavan in different parts of the body. Generally, these names are connected to Narayan, Vishnu, Om Keshavaya Namaha, Narayanaya Namaha, Madhavaya Namaha, Govindaya Namaha, Vishnavi Namaha, Madhusudanaya, Trivikramaya, Bhamanaya, Sridharaya, Rishikesaya, Padmanabhaya, Namodaraya, Vasudevaya. There's a 13th one here. But also all these names could be also connected to Krishna. Ultimately, he's Swayam Bhagavan. So it's important also, if you are doing this daily, to try to make each mark of tilak may become a prayer in connection to the meaning of each particular name. I won't go now into detail of all this. For example, Om Keshavaya Namaha. Keshavaya means also the one of curly hair, or also the one who controls Brahma and Shiva. So that's different names of Krishna, Narayana, but also Krishna, the one of curly hair. So as he controls Brahma and Shiva, please control me. Om Narayanaya Namaha. He's the shelter of all living beings, for human entities. Please be my shelter. Krishna is the shelter of Narayana, and Brahma Moha Lila show. Om Madhavaya Namaha, which means the husband of Sri, of Lakshmi. That's the name of Vishnu. But also Madhavaya means the husband of Sri, of Sri Radha. She's the ultimate Lakshmi. So also we could say, okay, may I also marry with your will, if you will, no? Oh Sri Krishna Madhava. Many other, Madhava also means the one who is sweeter than honey, Madhu. So also speaks about the sweetness of Krishna. May I be enchanted by that, and so on. Om Govindaya Namaha, the one who permeates all our senses. We already spoke about Govinda. Vishnava means all-pervading. Ultimately, we pray for having Krishna's and Guru's will as an all-pervading reality in our life. Madhusudanaya, Trivikramaya, Trivikram, the one who gives these three astounding steps as Bhamana. So the same way you asked cheated Bali and you took everything from him, please take everything from me. If you see that I need to be cheated by you for that, please do that. And allow me to engage in Atma-nivedana and offer my head for you to put your feet there. Madhusudan, the one who chastises the demon Madhu, who sometimes represents doubt, or has also to do like Krishna being a bumblebee and taking the Madhu, the essence of everything. May I be inspired in that direction, and so on. Sridharaya, let's finish what to do. Sridharaya means the husband, the one who sustains Sri, and also can refer to Narayan with Lakshmi and to Krishna with Radha, who eventually sustained by her eventually. So also we're praying for being sustained, Hara, by Sri, by Krishna's beauty, by Krishna's mercy, and so on. Krishikesaya, the one who is the master of all senses, so please allow me that all my senses are only engaging for your own sense pleasure. Krishikena Hrishikesh Sivana Bhakti Ruchate. Om Padmanavaya Namaha, the one who gives birth to Brahma in his Padma, in the lotus of his belly, but also the one who has a belly like a lotus-like belly, Krishna, or when Radha is resting on Krishna's belly, also that's a lotus. Her face is a lotus, and his belly is there. So many different ways. And Damodaraya, the one who is tied on the belly by the rope of love, may I develop such bhakti that I may also tie you. So in this way, no, it's not just a technical, ritualistic marking, superficial thing, and we continue. We should become all of our details in the practice of prayer. So the point is, all these markings, tilak, and so on, are there to increase our awareness of the sacredness of our sadhaka deha, I will say. Because again, our sadhaka deha is not our property. We shouldn't think in terms of my body. And that's not so easy. I mean, I can say that, but we have to walk the talk. So on a daily basis, we should learn to deal with the body in such a way that we do not conclude in terms of my body, my own body, or what to speak of my own self regarding the body, over-identifying with it. So we should gradually awake to this reality, sacred reality. This is not my body. This is a gift of Sri Guru, given at initiation, sadhaka deha. It is to be worshipped, it is to be nourished, it is to be ornamented. So these neck beads, tulsi neck beads, this tilak, all this is there for serving that thing that which is not my property. So Gopi Chandan and so forth, he didn't mention. Now, Gopi Chandan, of course, is this particular type of white tilak that is used in certain strands of Gaudiya Vedanta, mainly coming from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. This mentioned also in the Hari Bhakti Vilas and Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, mention of Gopi Chandan. There is some story that Gopi Chandan is coming from Dwarka, but to be sincere, I made some research and never found about that. And actually the main thing, and that's why it's called Gopi Chandan, Chandan has to do with sandal, with paste, and Gopi has to do with the gopis. So Gopi Chandan has to do with that famous pastime. I've heard that, but I never been able to find any scriptural source. Krishna's headache, the pastimes of Krishna's headache, and eventually the gopis giving the dust from their foot. And need to say that from that place, this gopi channel is being taken, which is, of course, very much connected to our own particular tradition, but also in our tradition, as we can see in our Guru Maharaj, myself here, and some other representatives, practitioners, there is the uses of Radhakund Tilak, Shyamakund Tilak, Brajaraj Tilak, earth, dust from Vrindavan, or other tilaks, Mahaprabhu, and this is of course bona fide Mahaprabhu himself. He put on Radhakunda Tilak when he rediscovered Radhakunda. This is mentioned in the 18th chapter of the Madhya Lila also. So there are some varieties regarding this tilak, and there is no necessity of going mad about that, regarding conflict. And generally, each particular lineage will have their own tilak with certain specific markings that will speak about their school of thought. But again, the substantial principle is what we are trying to say here. So at this point, someone may say, well, but all those are external markings. They do not have anything to do with inner culture. While you're engaging in bhajan to purify your heart, so what's the meaning of all these external signs? Some people even may say that's something cultural, that's relative to Indian culture, so we don't need to be attached to the external form of the culture. We may not need to use tilak and kantimala and so on. We are not debating. So, but the point again, these are not just relative cultural issues. There are elements that will be accompanying us eternally in Nitya Navadip in our perfected sadhaka deha there. So that's why we are using that. We are projecting those ingredients into eternity. So we need to enter into them now. So mala, tilak, all the things again are increasing our awareness of our constitutional position as sevakas, as servants. And so this will be most favorable, anukul, to our bhajan. Rupa Goswami in this connection in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu quotes one verse from the Padma Purana in this sense, which says that the Vaishnavas who wear tulasi, amalaki or lotus seed beads around the neck, of course mainly emphasizing tulasi, who wear the signs of conch and disc or on their shoulders, and whose foreheads are beautified by a vertical tilak, swiftly purify the world. So those signs purify the world, are invocations for the Lord to manifest in those forms, those signs, symbols. So also in this context, which we not mention apart from tilak, apart from the neck beads, some Vaishnava signs that sometimes can be worn on, like holy names, like brands, you say, like not with fire, but some sign here in the body. Guru Maharaj uses to give that in the context of these 5 ingredients of tapa, pundra, tilak, and so on. So the footprints of the Lord are also sometimes there that one can wear with gopi chandan or something. Again, as favorable, bhavanukul, to one's desired feelings. So after this mention at the end, Vishwanath mentioned something else, some further bhavanukul, favorable elements in the context of tulasi. But now not regarding tulasi as neck bead, but tulasi as plant herself. So he mentions serving tulasi, doing parikram, and paying obeisances. Mainly all this applicable to tulasi in this particular tulasi context. So for example, when he mentions serving tulasi, Rupa Goswami quotes Skanda Purana. There is one verse which speaks about 9 ways of serving tulasi. One is seeing tulasi. Now it's important to have this in mind. Seeing tulasi, touching tulasi, meditating on her, singing her names, in kirtan, offering pranam to her obeisances, hearing about her glories, Shravan, planting tulasi trees, sprinkling her with water, watering her, cleaning her place, and offering scents and flowers. I don't know if I mentioned 9 or more than them, but some of them are connected. Seeing, touching, meditating, singing, pranam, hearing, planting, sprinkling with water, cleaning her place, and offering her a scents and flower. It seems that there are 10. Of course, there are more even, but these are the main ones. So somehow or other, it's also recommended trying to serve tulasi in this way. And in scriptures, we also find Tulasi's glorification in connection to the aforementioned practices. There's another verse from Skanda Purana in connection to this one that Rupa Goswami quotes.
God doesn't exist. Fuck niggers. God doesn't exist. God doesn't exist. We hail Hitler. Heal. Kill niggers and Jews.
He's
Hail
like
Hitler.
a nigger here in old nicks. I hate fucking niggers. Niggers. They're all poor like Obama. Fuck Bush.
Michelle Obama. Niggers. I hate.
Wow.
Life is like a nigger. I'm a fag nigger. Fuck me and a Tesla.
Okay. It seems we have some invitation or some visit from some friends. But now I put the silencing option so they will not be able to check. They may write some stuff in the chat, but we can continue with the audio, no problem. So try to just concentrate on what we are saying here. Okay, so let me go back to the topic. We were sharing some verse from the Skanda Purana, where we'll speak about the benefits of serving Tulasi. In this particular way is mentioned here. So it says, I offer my obeisances unto Tulasi Devi, whose mere sight destroys all sins, whose mere touch purifies the body, who destroys all diseases of anyone who praises her, who destroys the fear of death of anyone who simply sprinkles her with water, who brings anyone who plants her closer to Sri Krishna, and who bestows prema bhakti on anyone who places her at Krishna's lotus feet. So in this way, there are some results connected to these different practices in relation to the service of Sri Tulasi. And of course, apart from this, the Vaishnavas can also serve Tulasi by doing archan. There are some other ways, circumambulating her, as we mentioned, offering parikram, circumambulation, by eating, by honoring properly Tulasi manjaris, by wearing, as we mentioned already, the neck beads, Tulasi neck beads, and also by wearing even tilak. Now we already mentioned tilak made from Gopi Chandan or tilak made from Radhakunda or das from Vrindavan, but also we can wear tilak made from earth around the root of Tulasi plant. That's also made sometimes. Some bars of earth are made and eventually dried and used in the context of marking the body with tilak. So all this is considered by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur as bhava, anukul, favorable to one's own mood. So as I mentioned, there is some slight, before going to the next category, there is some slight differences between bhava anukul and bhava sambandhi, the previous one, related to one's cherished mood. So it's very subtle. I will say that bhava sambandhi is mainly connected to Krishna himself. For example, we spoke about Ekadasi, which is Hari Vasara, Krishna's day. So his day. Janmashtami is his birthday. Damodar is his month, or Kartik, Radha's month, or Krishna himself as a granta, as a sacred literature like the Bhagavat, here in the Bhagavat, or direct remnants. Remnants, you say here, direct remnants used from him, as we mentioned, garlands and clothes. So all these bhava sambandhi, which means related to, are also related to Krishna directly, somehow or other. And on the other side here, the bhava anukul will be slightly different, but connected to things that are favorable to one's desired mood. They are not using direct remnants from him or direct representations of him, as we explained. So there is some slight variation between one and the other. So that's the first section. So let's continue with the second part that we want to share today. Wow, 1 second. So next section I will share through the chat as well. Let me see, 1 minute. 1 second. Okay, now we can continue, no problem, Maharaj. Let's see. So I will read the next section. It says like this. Since it is helpful to honor the cow, the banyan tree, the mirobalan tree, the Brahmins, and so on, such limbs of devotion are called bhava abhiruddha. not opposed or neutral to the development of the desired sentiments. Service to the Vaishnavas possesses a special characteristic in that it is included within all the practices of bhajan already described, that is, bhavamai, bhava-sambandhi, bhava-anukul, and bhava-virud, and therefore must be performed along with them. So now we are going to the fourth category, which is bhava-avirud, which is neutral or not opposed. Virudha means opposed, and avirud means not opposed, which means another way of saying neutral. So this is the fourth of 5 categories given by Vishwanath, and this one has to do with the 10th anga of bhakti given by Sri Rupa Goswami, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which is respecting the Amalaki, Ashwata trees and other trees. So part of that is included in what, by extension, in what Vishwanath is mentioning here. He's speaking mainly, starts with the cow, which we will see holds a very special position, as you may imagine, honoring, upholding the dignity, if you will, not only of the cows, of course, as the Shvata trees, Dhatri trees, and Brahmins also. It is said that are avirud, means factors that are not unfavorable, and thus they're neutral, but also implies they can be helpful for attaining one's desired feelings. Of course, this is also in the context of the wider appreciation of them, like trees being givers of shade, fruit, Brahmins being considered by scriptures guides for society. And mainly this emphasis will be mainly found in Vaidhi Bhakti orientation, but also has its place on some level of on Raga or Raga Marg. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu quotes Rupa Goswami there, a verse from the Skanda Purana in that connection that says that all the sins are destroyed of the human beings who worship, bow down to and meditate upon the cows, the Ashwata trees, Dhatri trees, Tulasi, Brahmins, and the Vaishnavas. So again, it's more in the context of destroying sins here on a general level, on a more Vaidhi-like orientation, but also in the context of Raga Marga, this has some place, especially some more than others. For example, the Ashwata tree, the banyan tree, is worshipable as a vibhuti of Bhagavan. And Krishna himself in the Bhagavad Gita says, of trees I'm the Ashwata, of these I am this, vibhuti, different vibhutis. The Brahmins, along with the cows, are both of them worshipable, as you know, especially because Krishna himself, he's said to have descended for their own benefit. We daily may pray as well. Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmana Hitaya Cha Jagadhitaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha. So this famous prayer and different names like Govinda, Gopal, his connection with cows, with the earth, with Brahmins is also implied. And although Tulsi and the Vaishnavas are especially worshipable, even more than all these, if you will, the Vaishnavas are like our topmost objects of worship, we'll see. But also the Ashwata tree, like the banyan tree or some other worshipable objects, that tree have been mentioned along with them, like trying to make it clear they are also worshipable. They have a worshipable status somehow or other. But again, among other items, main emphasis here also is put, apart from the Vaishnavas, as we will see now, worship of the cow. That's very important, especially in the context of Raga Marg, especially if you are a follower of Guru Maharaj. So it is said that bestows the ultimate goal, even for Krishna Bhakta. Rupa Goswami quotes here the Gautamiya Tantra in this connection. And there's one verse that speaks about different services rendered to the cows. Always carries the cows, the verse says, feed them grass, circumambulate them. For when the cows are pleased, Sri Gopal is also pleased. So Gopal is, one meaning of Gopal means, of course, the protector of the cows, the one whose own identity, whose own dharma as a Gopa is to worship the cows. The other day we were studying the Jugal Gita with some devotees in South America, mainly. And one verse mentions how Krishna is counting on a jeweled japa mala, rosary, the different groups, 108 groups of cows when they are to return back home in the afternoon. So he's doing japa mala of his own Istadev as a Gopa. As a Gopa, his dharma is to protect the cows, his Istadev is the cow. So he's doing japa of his Istadev. In the same way we are doing japa of our Istadev, chanting the names of Krishna, Krishna is doing japa of the cows of the Ristadev in the context of the Dharma as a gopa. So that's connected, interestingly, to, of course, to Raga Bhakti especially. And what to say if some devotee may have some special affinity in the direction of Sakya Bhav, that will be especially favorable as well. But eventually everything, as Guru Maharaj will say, Gokul, Golok is a planet of cows, the planet of givers, and all that implies. So we are to enter into that, to go through that sacred filter. Also, he speaks about Vaishnav Seva here, Vishwanath, mentioning that Vaishnav Seva belongs to all of the different categories mentioned till now, the four. In other words, the service to the Vaishnavs is filled with Bhavamai, is filled with the desired feelings, related to the desired feelings, Bhavanukul, favorable to the desired feelings, and not opposed, of course, to the desired feelings. All in one, like a special way of glorifying Vaishnav Seva, because actually that's our only duty, our only business, if you will, our highest one, Vaishnav Seva. Without that, there's no way to attain devotion. It is say Vaishnava Vishnuvat Puja. Vaishnavas are as worshipable as Vishnu himself, as God himself. Of course, for God himself, he will think otherwise and say, they're even more worshipable than me. There is this famous verse from the Adi Purana where Krishna is saying, O Partha, he's speaking to Arjuna, those who are devoted to me are not my devotees, but those who are devotees of my devotees, they are my devotees. And also, he says to Arjuna in another verse, Samsaro Vaishnavadino, Deva Vaishnava Palita, Ham Cha Vaishnavadinas, Tasmat Sascha Vaishnava. He says the whole world is under the care of the Vaishnavas, even though it may not seem so. All of the demigods are supplying heat, light, air, water, due to the support and nourishment of the Vaishnavas, Krishna is saying. And Krishna ends the verse saying, me, myself, I'm dependent on the Vaishnavas. Therefore, Tasmat Shreshtas to Vaishnava. Vaishnava means represent the highest position of all. So we are to service that if we want to become Vaishnava on some level. So let's go to this next section where Vishwanath is trying to think a little bit about what he has already been saying regarding these categories described herein. So I will share the section there in the chat. So it says like this. All of the practices mentioned above are to be accepted as one's duties. For example, it is seen that Brajeswari Jashoda gave more importance to diligently looking after the ingredients of nourishment, poshaka, such as milk, yogurt, and butter, than she does to Krishna himself, who is the object to be nourished, poshya. Therefore, she let down the hungry Krishna to whom she was feeding her breast milk to rescue the milk that was boiling. Similarly, it is not improper for the devotees on the path of raga, who are acquainted with rasa, to pay attention to that which nourishes hearing, chanting, and so forth. So, before turning to the last element of this fivefold list, the unfavorable elements to bhakti, Vishwanath kind of summarizes here the aforementioned items of sadhana, but trying to emphasize there are absolute duties for Raganuga sadhaka. Because the point is, someone may say, okay, but you are mentioning all these things, no? Like wearing this mark and wearing this neck bead and worship this plant, if you will, and doing so many things. But I mean, Raga Bhakti is not only about Shravan, Kirtan, and Shmaran, and mainly that. So he's trying to put all the things in context. So the point is, he's trying to here answer some question that we may have in our own mind. If one is wondering, how could a sadhaka pay attention to all these external duties, if one may consider them so? So Vishwanath, in order to reply to that, he quotes a very famous example from the Bhagavad, which is Srimati Jashoda Devi, paying even more attention to the articles, again, that will feed Krishna, the ingredients of nourishment, sometimes called poshana, than to the nourished one, Krishna himself, the poshya. So he's paying more attention to milk, yogurt, butter, than to Krishna. In a particular context, of course, all this is the preliminary section of the Damodar Lila. And this is described nicely the 9th chapter of the 10th canto of the Bhagavad, how Yashoda was looking at Krishna. First, she was feeding him her breast milk, and both of them were drinking their bhakti, their love for each other. So it seemed that they were going to be there for eternities. As you know, the milk thought, I won't have a chance to render service. So she was thinking about committing suicide, overflowing and going to the fire. So Krishna was first of all drinking the milk. So when the milk begins to boil, Yashoda puts Krishna on one side and runs just to save the milk, if you will, just to save the element that will be used for Krishna's pleasure. Of course, Krishna didn't like this, as you know, as part of the Leela, and he smashed a yogurt pot with a rod and went off to eat butter somewhere else, and Damodar Leela starts to manifest there. But the point is that Yashoda here, the point that Vishwanath wants to make, Yashoda here is putting Krishna down, pay attention to the milk. That was the point, as Guru Maharaj also said, this milk was acquired from special cows that were grazed with special grass, with the idea that Krishna is not stealing milk and butter from the neighbors. Yashoda thought in that in her Vatsalya psychology, what he's going there. I will put a special, I myself will prepare the ingredients. So I can keep Krishna for stealing milk product from the neighbors. And of course, the idea here is that the milk and the cows of Krishna are dear to Krishna. So serving them is a form of what we call sometimes as Tadiya Seva. Tadiya Seva means serving those things that are dear to Krishna. So here many things enter there. Mainly, sometimes it's spoken about the Bhagavat, Ganges, cows, milk, and of course tulsi as well, many elements, but extends to all this paraphernalia that will be offered in service to Krishna. And the Acharyas mentioned this Tadiya Seva, and Yashoda is making this point here, is higher than serving Krishna himself. Interesting point. So Yashoda is putting Krishna down to tend to the milk. Interestingly, she has so many servants that could prepare the milk for Krishna, but she herself wants to do that. As Radharani has so many manjaris that could go and cook for Krishna, but she goes every single day to do that for him. She considers that's my greatest fortune. Nanda Maharaj also performing so many personal services for Krishna and so on. So apparently they are neglecting Krishna, but actually they are taking care of those things destined for his pleasure. They are obsessed with Krishna's pleasure. So Yashoda knows, you are now like protesting that I'm leaving you for attending the meal, but I know that if I do not take care of the meal, which will be turned into ladus eventually, you will protest because you don't have your ladus. So the point is, she is only obsessed with Krishna's service and pleasure, even though externally it takes some other form. And of course, Krishna shows himself angry externally, but inwardly he's really pleased with that. So the point is here that similarly, of course, we are not to imitate Yashoda, but we are to take some idea to follow a sadhaka. So a sadhaka who wants to thread the path of raga bhakti, he may give even more special attention to those kinds of sadhana that nourish the internal practices of Shravan, Kirtan, Smaran. So this will know also as an expression of their attachment to their main angis of raga bhajan, of Shravan, Kirtan, and so on. It's not a dismissal of them. For example, if you are fully absorbed in Guru Seva, and Guru may ask you, do this, and that will be helpful for you to increase your your Seva Abhiman, Sisya Abhiman, your identity as a servant, your identity as a student. So it's important to engage in those activities. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur even has said once that for a Raga Bhakta, and those are the implications here, we already explained Shravan, Kirtan, Smara are the main angis of Raga Bhakti. Superior, they are superior, but for example, the management that may be required for arranging a Kirtan, you may be organizing a Kirtan with Vaishnava, that's not less important. One person may be making arrangements and managing, preparation for the Kirtan performance, the prasad, some other may be sending the invitations to inspire others to participate. So all these activities are not inferior, the point is, to actual Shravan and Kirtan. And some devotees are engaged in that for some reason or another, and that preaching, managing, holding meetings, organizing, going here and there, trying to promote Nam Sankirtan in a proper way, and there are duties to be performed. Guru gives instruction. But of course, this is not an excuse to now go deeper into that. It is essential at the same time to internally maintain, keep a certain mood while engaging in these activities, because you can also engage in managing and spreading, and it can really disconnect you from the Raga mark. So how to do that in the context that nourishes your Raga mark? As Guru Maharaj will say, your practice should nourish your preaching should nourish your inner life of bhajan. So when the proper mood is present, so there will be no harm in executing these activities, because they will be turned to be favorable for Raga Bhakti. Again, in one sense, one may say they may be neutral, some of them, and if you are not embracing them properly, they may turn out to be unfavorable, but they have the potential to be favorable if approached with the proper awareness. So that's the idea of Vishwanath invoking here the example of Jashoda in paying attention to these elements in a particular context of being pleasure to Krishna, not as an excuse of serving Krishna, but actually doing something else. So we have two more brief sections, so let me share them with you so we may close this. So there's the next one, sorry, not the second, it's almost like the fourth section. So now Vishwanath will finish his section of 5 expressions of bhakti by speaking about bhava virud, those things that are unfavorable. Also, he will mention one more neutral element. So he says like this. He already spoke about this, as you may recall. Thinking oneself as non-different from the object of worship, aham rahupasana, nyasa, mudra, meditating on Dwaraka, worshipping the queens of Dwaraka, and so forth, are unbefitting acts, bhava viruddha, and should not be engaged in. Hearing discourses on Puranas other than Srimad Bhagavatam is a neutral factor. So here Vishwanath mainly focuses on bhava virud, as we already mentioned, unfavorable act, although he again mentions one more neutral practice, which is hearing stories from the Puranas as a marginal practice, as something that can be helpful if properly approached. Which the idea is we should know how to approach it, because it can be there or it cannot be there, because we have the Bhagavad Purana, which is the Amal Purana, the Purana Nirguna Purana. Beyond all the gunas, most of the other Puranas, as you know, there may be Sattvika, Rajasika, Tamasika Puranas. There may be glorifying a particular deity for a particular sense. Many of them are incomplete nowadays, so we may take them out of context. So that's why Srila Jiva Goswami, his Tattva Sandarbha, he began that by establishing Praman, the topmost evidence in the form of the Bhagavad Purana. But if we pay, we can quote them as Rupa Goswami is doing, as we have shared Padma Purana, Skanda Purana, but in the context of the Bhagavad Purana. That's our proper approach. We connect with other Puranas in such a way that we see them revolving around the Bhagavad Purana, the whole Rantaraj, the emperor of all scripture. In that sense, that will nourish, that will help our bhajan. So after that brief mention, he mainly concentrates in this section about the bhava virud, which is the final 5th element of this 5-fold engagement in Raga Bhakti. In this case, it will be a non-engagement, something to avoid. And he goes to the bhava virud, the unfavorable items that he already mentioned, as you may recall. Aham rahupasana, which referred to identify with the object of my worship in the form of God or in the form of the role model to follow. I want to become that person in Raga Bhakti. That will be the idea, but that will be the idea not to follow. I mean, I follow Lalita, I follow Rupa Manjari, I follow Subal, but I follow their mood. I don't want to become them. Or Nyasa and Mudra, these different gestures and postures that may be more connected to Vaidhi Marg Sampradaya. I won't enter into detail again now about this because we spent a whole lecture or two about them. Meditation on Dwarka and its queens, the worship of Rukmini and so on. We can share one example that sometimes is shared in this connection, how we already spoke about the consequences of doing that, but there's one interesting example that we can share in this connection, which is how this may damage our Raga, Bhakti, and Das are considered Bhava Virudh. There's an example of one Krishna Das Bhava, who one became desirous to have darshan of the Char Dham in India. They're called Char Dham, the 4 holy dams. This is a separate category to our dams of Gaudiyas. These 4 dams have to do with the 4 cardinal points, the directions. So you have Badrinath, you have Puri, Rameshwar, and Dwarka. North, Badrinath, Puri on the east, Rameshwar in the south, Dwarka on the west. So it is said that this devotee wanted to give this parikram, and Sri Radha, no, devotee was a devotee of Sri Radha. He was living in Vrindavan. So Srimati Radharani appeared to him in a dream and said to him, "Don't leave Brajadam." But he ignored the dream because he only thought innocently it was just a dream. He didn't took it as a revelation. He took it. He said, "This is an ordinary dream." So he set out to visit the 4 dams, and when he went to Dwarka, he obtained what is called a Tapta Mudra, which is a brand mark, marking fire that you cannot take that out. So after that, after the whole parikram, he returned to Braj, and again Srimati Radharani appeared to him in a dream and told him, "You have this Tapta Mudra from Dwarka, so now you are counted amongst the followers of Satyabhama, one of the queens of Dwarka. So you should return there to Dwarka." If you can imagine. So at that point, Krishnadas Baba understood, oh, my first dream was not a dream, actually, it was real, and now this is being confirmed. So he became really agitated with feelings of separation from Vrindavan, from Sri Radha, the impending separation. And he consulted with different devotees, but they were really like overwhelmed, not knowing what to do, what's a solution or atonement. So it is said that finally Krishnadas Baba burned his body up into ashes, like in the fire of separation. So I cannot tell if he really entered into the fire literally, or if he died in separation, and that's the actual fire. But the point is of the story, I think it's clear. If you visit Dwarka, just in case, be very careful with brand marks. But the whole point is made clear by this story. So let's finish with one last section, with which Vishwanath is closing this 14th part. So it says like this. Oh, I realized that, one second, the previous part, I only shared that with Art and CD. I didn't put the option of sharing with everyone. So here I'm doing it. So please bear in mind that the last part I have just shared is the previous one, and the very last part of this section is the penultimate one that I shared there. So I will read it now. It says, so this is a conclusion to an explanation of Vishwanath regarding his 5-fold explanation of these engagements in Raga Bhakti. He says, although there is no transformation or change in Bhakti, which consists of Sat, Chit, and Ananda, it has nevertheless been divided into categories such as direct cause to make it more easily understandable, which it would not have been otherwise. Just as it is said in the Bhakti Shastras, the 6 bhavas, like Sneha, are manifestations of Prem. And just as Rasa Shastras define rasa through words such as vibhav, so I have also used terms like upadana karana, direct cause, to make it more easily understandable. May the saintly devotees forgive me for this. So why is Vishwanath mentioning this? Because of course, as you may know, Bhakti is totally transcendental. It's the essence of the Swarup Shakti, so it's not tinged with Maya Shakti at all. But sometimes here Vishwanath spoke of Bhakti in terms of Upadana Karana, which generally is translated, as we mentioned, as ingredient cause. And when we say ingredient cause, technically the expression Upadana Karana has to do also with material cause. As we gave the example of the clay and the potter, and the clay being the ingredient cause, it's matter. So in material causes, in matter, transformations take place. Just as example, no? The example of the clay used to make a jug, and the jug being a transformation of the clay. So the point is, someone may think from the example, oh, Bhakti is transform as clay is transformed, is capable of transforming the context affected by material laws. So that's why Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is trying to make that point clear here, that bhakti, actually I'm trying to speak about bhakti, he's saying here, and trying to describe bhakti, but bhakti is very difficult to describe. So for convenience sake, I've used this term, upadana karana. So I express in terms of so-called ingredient cause or material cause, amongst other designations, although of course bhakti cannot be subject to transformations, to material transformation. Of course, it will be transformed in itself. It will grow and expand and express new aspects of itself, but not in the context of material transformation. So to make that point clear, more clear, he makes the example of the different stages of prem. He says, just as sneha, mana, pranay, raga, nurag, and mahabhav are called manifestations of prem, or sometimes may be called transformations, just for convenience sake, again, just as rasa, which is also a complete self-manifest, sometimes is indicated with words like vibhav and other ingredients. Similarly, Vishwanath makes this point, for convenience sake, I'm using terms like upadana karana for trying to speak about bhakti. So hopefully that helped, he expects, helped us to understand the matter more clearly. But if that has not been the case, just in case he concludes this section by begging forgiveness to the saintly devotees, which he thinks of at the readers, to the saintly readers, to all of you. So interestingly, he's ending his first section by begging forgiveness to us for his so-called audacity. But actually, of course, after such a prayer, we will ask Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, may you forgive us for any offense we may commit by trying to grasp what you are trying to teach us. So, some words connected to this last section of the 14th prose of this first section, or illumination. In this way, we are finishing here the first section of the Raga-vartma-candrika, called again Pratama Prakash, or first illumination of this moon rays, which is, this is almost, it's half of the book and a little bit more. So next class, next week, we will start with the second illumination called Dvitiya Prakash, the second almost half of the book, where Vishwanath will be changing, not changing connection, but changing the focus on the topics. This is a second section in itself. And he will present different concepts in relation to Krishna's aspects, mainly of majesty and consummate sweetness, Aishwarya and Madhurya, and how the two interrelate one another, and all this, of course, mainly in the context of Raga Bhakti. So, thank you so much to all of you, and well, let me activate again the microphone if any of you may have any question. We have some few minutes. So there I gave you permission in case you need to activate the microphone. And if there are any questions, or you can of course send them via chat as well, no problem. You can present whatever doubts or commentary you may have. Okay, we don't have today Brigopad Prabhu, so it seems that we don't have questions. He told me he will be being here, so no problem. So I think we can finish today here. We have some days to process the content of today's lecture. So thank you so much to all of you for your time, for your presence and patience. Thanks so much to all the ones who appear in the lecture without being invited, for increasing our Tarora Pisahishna as well. So thank you very much, and see you next Monday. Srila Gurudev ki jai, Sriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Shri Raga-vartma-candrika ki jai, Shri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur ki jai, Gaur Bhakta-vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premananda Haribo. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyaiva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai.